Hello and welcome to the April 12th, 2023 coffee break. My name is Andrew Miller, your host, as always, lead principal technologist at Pure. Excited today, as always, so many great guests, to be joined by Justin Emerson, FlashBlade technology evangelist. We're going to be walking through, like it says there, the disc Dinosaurs, never saw it coming. Having a little bit of fun, hopefully never jumping the shark or being too snarky, but having a little bit of fun with the Meteoric impact of FlashBlade E. And inside my head, I'm thinking like, man, I'm saying meteor and meteoric. Meteoric? Like, what's the right way to say that, Justin? You want to help me out there? Did I get it right?
Meteoric, although generally like you use meteoric in the context of a meteoric rise, which if you think about it, doesn't make sense because meteors don't rise.
They don't ascend, they usually descend.
It's quite the opposite.
Maybe we should have thought of that before the title. I don't know, but it felt right at the time. So diving in, a little bit of opening housekeeping. As always, this is a series. Thank you for joining us for what, if I'm keeping track right, is the 28th coffee break. We're a little bit past 2 years, happy second anniversary. Always like to put this up just because of the solution focus. These, in my opinion, but hearing from other folks too, even yesterday at a partner event in Atlanta, these have aged better over time. So both the educational side, the career advice, the actual technology, the architecture, feel free to go back and look at some of these. You can also find them at purestores.com/events. There's a whole events center, which lists not just the coffee break series, but a bunch of other great series that are different styles, Tech Talks, Flash Crew. You can as well find previous links there too, if you don't use the bit.ly link that I had earlier. Now, I would not be a good Pure citizen if I didn't make sure to highlight that in just about 2 months, I'm pretty sure maybe it's the next time I'll see you in person, Justin, at Accelerate. We're going to be at the brand new Resorts World Las Vegas. So without further ado, there's an amazing 42-second video. Thanks to the Accelerate team. Let's roll. Got to wait for the last couple. Now I'm missing the instrument. Shame on
the last hit of the xylophone.
Xylophone, marimba. Yeah, xylophone.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's like, the last one. As always, I do know that folks, so please make sure to join us for Accelerate if you can. If not, there's going to be a good bit of the content online. Also, do realize that, hey, there is a whole coffee card thing to this. $10. You receive those after this, the first 1,000 participants. There's some folks in the exclusions list. You are super special to us, but you know that we can't send you coffee cards for the obvious reasons. Wrapping up the housekeeping, I always like to do a little bit of even just not a full introduction, because if you've attended a coffee break, you don't need to hear about Andrew every time. But in this case, when we start to talk about hard drives and disk, like actually when you and I were chatting, Justin, like we both had some help desk background. And I remember taking hard drives for some professors at the university I worked at and freezing them, usually for a day or two, give or take, because they'd stuck up inside, stiction kind of stuff. The heads are incredibly close to the platter. And that sometimes would be enough to get the drive to spin again, that you could actually get the data off in their last quiz or papers or whatever else they needed for their classes, kind of thing. So that's more just like Andrew from a hard drive perspective. But Justin, do you mind briefly introducing yourself?
Sure, thanks. So Justin Emerson, I've been with Pure since 2020. Before that, I worked with in the channel community and reseller partners. Down there is my lovely wife and son, prior to my professional career, I worked, but prior to that, actually went as a student to University of California, Irvine. I majored in Japanese, which surprises a lot of people. And then that screenshot down there in the lower left was I used to play Dance Dance Revolution competitively.
They definitely have that on me. We had it for the Wii and never did very much with it. So, look at that. And just to be upfront for everyone, we're not going to explore Dance Dance Revolution theme very much. If you'd like that, you can contact Justin separately. He's got his email there, but hey, so yeah. But it's cool. Next month, we'll be joined by John Brett. If you remember, about 2 years ago, we actually had Paul Ferraro on to talk about Evergreen, well, Pure as a Service, now Evergreen One. We're actually going to be talking a good bit about storage as a service, any kind of subscription economy, what Pure has done there recently in the space. And actually, John, he actually used to work with customers to help write their RFPs or their requests from big vendors around various as a service offerings. So we'll walk through that a good bit. But this month, it's all about disk, Dinosaurs, FlashBlade, and of course, Justin. We will be doing a little bit of the normal agenda, not too much agenda. First part, as I often like to do, a little bit of career exploration. I appreciate Justin being willing to kind of go there from a personal standpoint of some of his career and the inflection points there. Kind of being you can't stop fixing things sometimes. Then we'll actually do a continuation of something that Justin has collaborated a lot with Brian Gold on around the Better Science series. Some more of that content that links into, just between us, our super secret plan. If anyone knows from from an electric automaker standpoint, there's one of those out there. You can go Google on it. Let's talk some about FlashBlade, and then focusing on hopefully what matters most to you, which is not just the products and the technology, but where would you use it and how and why. Please make sure to put questions into the chat throughout. We've got some great folks on, Olivia, Emily, Andy, Bish, that are here to help with Q&A and chat, and we'll have some Q&A at the end as well if they don't get to your questions. Maybe even if they do, we may read them back out. We'll be done at around 45 minutes past the hour. Let's go ahead, though, and kick off, if you don't mind, Olivia, we'll kick off the first poll here before we get started. So this is, to be honest, I appreciate that we have the latitude from a Pure standpoint to have a little bit more fun with the poll questions sometimes. So what's your favorite dinosaur? I was thinking when we were writing this, Justin, of the scene in one of the Jurassic Park where the kid's watching Barney while his uncle, I don't know, is getting chased through, so.
I would definitely answer I prefer cats, but I do love dinosaurs too.
You're the preferred, yeah, cool. So we'll just let that run for a minute, and you can ponder, you can give deep thought and ponder into your answer. But wanted to start out with really a little bit of your personal history, Justin. So, I mean, you've been with Pure for a little while, but there's been a good bit before that. Do you mind even kind of starting back a little bit with, there was partner side. It was even back at, I think, University of California, Irvine. I'm kind of narrating a little bit of your history.
So as I mentioned, I went to college in Southern California at UC Irvine. While I was there, I became a student worker in what was called Administrative Computing Services at the time, which was the IT department for all of the internal sort of business functions of the university. So I didn't deal with faculty, I didn't deal on the academic side. But rather I worked more in HR and accounting and all of those kinds of, departments that every kind of company or organization has to have. What I remembered most about that time was I was part of the team that did the first VMware Virtual Infrastructure 3.0 deployment in the UC system. I think Santa Barbara did a 2.5 install before us, but we were the first to show off HA and vMotion and all that really cool stuff.
DRS,
at the time was
making a big
really revolutionary. And I remember thinking, wow, this is the biggest thing since sliced bread. It's going to be in every data center in like 3 or 4 years. And I was wrong. It was 2. And so I ended up going to a partner to go do like VMware installs. And because I was like, that was a really fun problem to fix. But now I want to go fix it at other places because it's everywhere. More interesting challenges. And that was one of the cool things about the partner side is you got to touch so many other, environments and customers and stuff, which if you're working at a single customer, you kind of have your environment, and that's sort of the world that you live in. So I started out doing professional services and then, started seeing things that I feel like there's a better way to do this problem as being someone in the field. So I'm started moving into pre-sales and then I started saying, well, there's so much more around this VMware environment than just the VMware part. There's the networking and the storage. And so I started going and trying to do those things too. And so I've always go and look at problems and say, how can I fix those things, which sometimes drives people a little bit nuts. And sometimes you learn after being somewhere for a long time that something is not actually a problem, or even though you view it as a problem, it's that way for a reason. That may be a good reason, or it may be a bad reason. And if it's a bad reason, once you finally realize that, that's sort of when you say, okay, I can either choose to ignore it, or I can go somewhere else because I find this problem is intractable. So
Oh, there's a little bit of, we all vote with our feet eventually. And I especially have the comment of that when I started, there's actually a gentleman who'd been in IT for 20 years, but he's this really good, humble guy. He's my boss. And he would regularly help with explanations of, like, I'd see something like, what in the world is that? Like, I'm right out of college, and be like, well, we did it for these reasons at the time, and we want to come back and revisit it, but that was the best we could do then. And there's a lot of rational thought. So, so keep going. So at VMware, at a partner doing VMware things. And I think, if I remember right, you ran across Pure Storage, actually a little bit hands-on.
Yeah, actually, the partner I was working at the time, we were one of the first ones to sign up with Pure. I remember I got to be on stage at, I think it was the Pure sales kickoff in like 2015 or 2016, the one that was at the Marriott in Santa Clara, although I think a bunch of them were. And I got to accept a little trophy on behalf of my company, and it was great. But I remember working with some of the very first Puritans down in SoCal who are still here, interestingly, at least a few of them. And so yeah, I've been working in sort of the Pure orbit now for close to 10 years.
There's even the comment you made too earlier when we were chatting about just that, especially on the partner side. I mean, one of the keys to success, and it resonates for me given similar background, is to always think of the customer as an extension of you,
right?
And their success is your success. I'll let you keep going there, and then a little bit of how you came over to Pure.
Well, when you're something that people don't often realize is when you're at a partner, the thing that you have to offer your customers is your expertise and your trustworthiness, because you do services, and those things are based upon your expertise and how much you're trusted. But generally speaking, the stuff that you have to sell is stuff that somebody could buy from anywhere else. Because you don't fundamentally like make anything like a vendor does. So if somebody doesn't like you anymore, they can just go get that from somebody else. So literally the most important thing is your reputation and your expertise to your customer. And so the way that you facilitate those things, the way that you foster and grow those things, is by taking you must take a customer first mindset where you say, how do I do everything on behalf of my customer? That's one of the things I like about Pure. I'd never worked at a vendor before I came to Pure, because I feel like we have very much a similar philosophy behind that. I remember being on a call with salespeople from some other company who will not be named, and they said, we should position this product here. And I said, why? That doesn't make sense. And they said, because that's the one I get paid on. And I found that disgusting. And I said, I never want to be in that kind of a company or situation. And so far, Pure has never been like that. We've always been very customer first.
It helps. It's possible. It's made possible by having good products that are designed from a customer-centric, not perfect ones, but there's a whole product and capability that enables that mindset. When you bring that mindset, maybe last but not least, I know where I'm letting the straw out a little bit. You came to Pure, but it was partly because you actually saw a preview, I think, of the origin of what we're here to talk about today at a product level. Once we get there,
yeah. So because we had an amazing channel team at the partner that I was at, I got to, when I was up in the Bay Area for something else, I was invited to Pure headquarters, and I got to meet John Hayes, one of our founders. And he showed a prototype of what eventually became FlashBlade. And I thought it was just, again, I had that same feeling about it that I had with, VMware VI3 back in 2005, 2006, which was, this is just amazing technology. And I really, really wanted to be a part of it. And so, when I eventually did come to Pure, I came in support of FlashBlade, just because I think it's such a cool product. To say nothing ill of FlashArray. FlashArray is also an amazing product, but from an architectural standpoint, the stuff that FlashBlade does is just, I think, so cool.
Super unique. I think there was some comment about that not everything needs fixing, and you and your wife have conversations about that periodically, but maybe we'll let that one go and keep going. But I had to put it in. So actually, so let's actually I'll close up the first poll here and we will launch the second one. So let me end that and share it back just because, hey, we're going to have fun with it. So for anyone who's wondering, hey, T-Rex edges out Velociraptor. We have a healthy population of folks that just prefer cats. A little bit in chat. Barney actually has a respectable showing, although Barney's, maybe aging a little bit. Olivia, if you don't mind, actually go ahead and launch poll 2 there. And this now starts to go into a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. So we're curious. This is actually your brainchild, Justin, as we're getting into thinking about Flash and it being pervasive. For me, I'll just say the only hard drives in my house at this point are for backups. I think maybe for you it's a media server. Is that right?
Basically, and it's not for lack of trying to replace them. What was Kaz, our other co-founder, likes to point out that even for everything that used to be on spinning disk in his house, he's since replaced them, even if it has been at the time at great cost. But I guess when you're the founder of a successful company, you can afford that.
It feels like an internal consistency thing too for him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got it. And he did a demonstration at our sales kickoff, and he used a hard drive, and he said, I bought this used on eBay so that I will not give any of my money to the hard drive maker. But I thought this would be a fun poll question, because sometimes people don't think about how much computing has changed because of Flash. If you looked several years ago, you might have a spinning disk in your DVR, you might have it in your game console, you might have it in your desktop computer, all that kind of stuff, right? You might have hard drives in all of these different things. All of those things are now either Flash-based or in the cloud, right? It's hard to think of a consumer electronics device that still has a hard drive. And that's actually something that's really different between now and 10 years ago when Pure, well, a little bit more than 10 years ago now, but when, a decade ago when we were first getting into the market in a big way as Pure Storage, we were like on that trajectory of Flash. And if you look at now, why is Flash, which we'll talk about later, why is Flash getting cheaper? It's because it's in everything. When people say, what's the next thing after Flash? I say, I don't know, but whatever the next thing after Flash is, it's going to need to be in everything in order to achieve the economies of scale that Flash has. Because Flash hasn't gotten inexpensive because of data centers. It's gotten inexpensive because of phones and tablets and TVs and cars and all that stuff.
So we wanted to continue a little bit, partly based on the poll from January, and a little bit more of the better science content, because there's a whole wealth of stuff there. We actually promised that at the end. So if you want to go back and listen to January, Brian Gold walked through a good bit of this. But actually, I'll let you, I feel like you were segueing into this thought a little bit, Justin, on how data has changed. And I'll just let you keep going from here, if that's all right. Yeah.
So I think if we had to encapsulate what better science means to us, the idea is that it's how we approach solving problems. And I think the way that I try and encapsulate as in as short a time as possible what the real problems are we'll narrow the scope here to just say enterprise storage, is that the nature of data has really changed. We talk about the explosion of data. We talk about data as the new oil. But when we think back to what data was many years ago, it was created at human speed. So you had individuals, a transaction would happen because somebody would buy something, or some record would be created because of some interaction that people had. But basically, new data got created because of human activity. But that's really not the case anymore. Now we generate so much data, and most of that data is generated because of things that systems do on their own, sensors, Internet of Things devices, the phones in your pocket, the app, like all of these things are constantly writing new data. And so when we talk about that data has exploded, the reason that we say there's so much more data now is because we're writing so much more of it. It seems kind of obvious, but what that means is that we've gone from a environment where most data was, where most of the IO was reads and not writes, to now a new world where there are so many more writes. There's a lot of really cool like computer science stuff and how you do data data placement and build data structures to orient it more towards update driven systems.
And only file systems. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you think about that in the context of the change in media, which is what we've been talking about, right? Not even talking about like floppies like behind me, but you know, the hard drive is about 70 years old as a concept. This is a lovely picture of one of the very early ones. And the big problem with hard drives was always seek time. You know, like you said, you used to put them in the freezer, and that's because there was a physical head that has to move back and forth around, right? And so everything in computer science terms was organized around avoiding disk seeks, which happen when you read. So if you had data that was going to be read all the time and seeking was slow and you needed to seek in order to read stuff, you had to build everything around that constraint because disk seeks were the enemy. That is not the case anymore. We do not live in a world where the majority of enterprise systems like this, I'll say systems, not bits, because we'll come back to that. But they use media that is solid state and where writes are the constraint. It's not that they don't write extremely well, but it's that there's a finite endurance. And that means that there's like this conflicting trend. We're writing so much more data and we're writing it to media that has a finite endurance. And that endurance is getting worse every generation of NAND as we go from SLC to MLC to TLC to QLC to maybe someday PLC or something like that, right? This is the core dilemma that every modern storage platform has to deal with. If you're using Flash as your media and you're living in a world of huge data ingest and data update rates, how do you square these two things because they're sort of in opposition to each other? And our point is that using old systems designed for old media and then using them with new media is, put a technical term on it, dumb. If you are using old data structures that are designed around avoiding disk seeks, they usually do that by implementing lots of different things that write more in order to read less. This is where things like copy on write and all these other kinds of technologies come from, not just to guarantee, data consistency and resiliency, but also to allow for navigating these data structures in as few disk seeks as possible. But then we're running that on top of Flash masquerading as a hard drive, because that's what a solid state disk is. This is what Brian talked about on the last coffee break in January, is the entire idea of a solid state disk is to take a bunch of Flash and put this translation layer, this Flash translation layer in between it and the system in order to hide the fact that it's not a hard drive. And so it appears to the rest of the world the same way a hard drive would, which is logical block addresses, which is just a way to map sectors and tracks from a hard drive. And so,
LLBA.
Yeah, this causes so much inefficiency. It causes so much extraneous write amplification, which is, in other words, if I'm going to overwrite the same 4K sector over and over and over again, hard drives work like that, but Flash doesn't work like that. Flash has to do things at a block level. It has to do erase blocks and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm not going to rehash all of that stuff. You can check out, the session
Go back to
Ryan
January.
did.
Yep.
But that putting an old data system, an old data structure on top of new media pretending to be the old thing, like you said, when you were working and said, why were things like this? It's like, well, at the time, that was the thing to do. And if you look at this, you can see, okay, I understand how we got to this point, because it was inertia in all these things. But at some point, you have to be the chronic fixer and you have to step back and say, is there a way to fix this problem? And that's actually what Pure Storage was founded to do. The whole idea behind our company was we should build systems designed for Flash from the get-go and not build systems that are retrofitted or systems that have to accommodate both things. You need to build systems that solve these problems, that because these problems are only going to get worse over time. Even back in the early days of SLC and MLC Flash, we could see where things were going, and we could see that if you don't solve these problems today, you will have to eventually solve these problems later, and it will be much more painful to do it later when you've built up 10 years worth of scaffolding on top of what is effectively an unstable foundation. And so that's what Purity, that's what Direct Flash, that's what all of our design philosophy is about. This is why we call it better science, because we think that this is a better approach to solving the problems of modern data storage. And I would imagine that if you look at this logically, I don't think you could really disagree that in a vacuum, this is clearly the better way to approach it.
I'm going to go back into a little bit of high school and taking Latin, tabula rasa, right? Another term for clean sheet. But the idea of that sometimes you have to go back to first principles. It's not easy. And a lot of times companies that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years, they're dealing with innovators dilemma type stuff. But that's where we started 10 years ago and been working on it. So, okay.
And actually, we didn't have an existing business model that we needed to defend. Similarly to, as we'll talk about with, electric vehicles, if you're building internal combustion engine vehicles and you're making lots of profit doing so, and there's this really disruptive technology, you're not really incentivized to rock the boat too much. So that's where disruptors can come in and really change the market.
So I did a Latin illusion, but I think we've got almost an Egyptian illusion with the pyramid, though. So bring us home in this section.
Yeah. So when we talked about the pyramid, I know we did all this Direct Flash stuff on the last time when Brian was here, but there's a great article I highly recommend. I say great, I wrote it, so I'm a little biased, but there's an article I wrote which is all about, it's called Better Science Volume 2, and it's all about what the pyramid is. And the pyramid is our internal log structured merge tree based database system. It's our key value store that we use. It's designed specifically for Flash. I did a podcast actually recently with Fong Wang, who is Pure employee number 3, although that's debatable. If you want to know why, you can listen to the podcast. But what's really amazing is when we started the company and said, we need to build a system that's designed for Flash. And so we need to do that all the way from the ground up, including how we lay out data and how we build our system. And so the goals that were set out back then are things that we've pretty much achieved. We built a system that went from, we built a structure that's fit in systems that are tens of terabytes to now tens of petabytes. And so we've gone, 1,000-fold scale designed specifically for all Flash. And we've had customers who've been on a single array through many generations, but one contiguous identity of an array now for more than 10 years. So people have really been with us on this journey. And the combination of these two things is what we mean when we talk about building a system designed for the ground up with hardware and software. You want to map the things that your system does as efficiently as you can onto the hardware that does it, because that's how you do things like use less energy. That's how you do things like use the product that you have, use the components that you have the most effectively. And this is where I think software-defined systems, while they are great from a flexibility standpoint, they have to sort of build everything to the lowest common denominator. Whereas what we do is by engineering both ends of the spectrum, we get the maximum amount of efficiency out of everything sort of in between. And so it allows us to map the portions of our data structure, our log structured merge tree, directly onto the hardware components that we design to run them. And that's, I think, as far as I know, unique amongst the storage industry.
So with that, we're going to do a pause because this is actually going to segue almost directly into section 3. But I'll go ahead and end and share the poll. This was still having a little bit of fun, but it was actually meant to help highlight. And thank you, Justin. I always feel like every time it's pause, thanks. That was awesome. There is a good number of folks that have a lot of hard drives or only for backups. So, actually, majority, it's only for backups. That's interesting. We're at 50. Plus the ones who say no, it's a hard drive, that puts us at a majority. So we can interpret any poll the way we want to, I guess.
Maybe that's no insults to the folks that do have lots of hard drives. We're not saying you look Betamax, but
no, that was just having fun because hopefully we have a little more license to do that.
But it does mean that the majority of people out there, aside from backups on a shelf kind of thing, don't have hard drives in most of their devices.
So Olivia, if you don't mind launching poll number 3. And we'll go ahead and there. Okay, so this is where we get a little more practical. Someone's saying, hey, the question was a little bit ridiculous with Betamax. Yeah, we're having fun with it. But in this case, how much disk is not in your house, but in your data center? And we try to think about the best way to kind of categorize this for you based on based on size, not based on numbers or quantities or rack units. You can put other comments in the chat, please. As well as what do you use disk for today? Like, why do you still have it there? There has to be a purpose for anything in the data center. It has to be justified and be business case and use case. But here we actually want to continue on into, and maybe we'll see if we can we'll pull this section a little shorter if we can, Justin, too. Thinking about it is FlashBlade, but there's a reason we're going to call it, just between us, our super secret FlashBlade plan. Get to that in 1 second, because we actually want to start with continuing to explore that, really the hard drive theme and what is it used for in the data center today. So back to you, Justin.
Yeah. So despite the fact that, we've been very successful with, introducing flash into so many parts of data centers. Now, this includes data that's stored in, say, for example, public hyperscale cloud providers and stuff. But 90% of unstructured data still today really does live on spinning disk. And that's from a capacity standpoint, right? Which makes sense. The majority of the capacity is still living on slower media. And we use much faster stuff for the kind of thing that needs that performance, right? And so we think, and the analysts are the ones telling us this, we think that data is going to grow something like tenfold by the end of the decade. And if that's going to happen, and you look at how much spinning disk is out there, how much power and all those other things that uses, that's really not a sustainable approach, because disk inherently has certain characteristics. There's a physical platter, and that platter spins at a certain number of revolutions per minute, and there's heads and all these other like actual physical constructs. And so if you are looking to grow your data footprint by 10x and your drives are not growing in size by 10x in that same time period, because if you have a 20 terabyte spinning disk today, that would mean having a 200 terabyte spinning disk by 2030. And that, I don't think anybody's talking about that, right? So, and not only that, because you have physical platters that are spinning and motors and all these other kind of things, this is going to use a lot of energy, and it uses all that energy even at idle as well. And because there is so much complexity in building huge systems out of all of these fundamentally unreliable mechanical components, there's all this complexity in building huge disk-based systems. And, I can imagine that most people would rather not run spinning disk. Given all other things being equal, they would say, well, I'd much rather have all flash for everything. But why don't people have all flash for everything? Why do I still have hard drives in my media server?
There wasn't another option historically. Even getting some comments in the chat, just basically money. I think Brian there wrote the dollar symbol like 10 times. That feels about right. Maybe 20 times.
If I had the option of a 10 terabyte hard drive and a 10 terabyte SSD, and they were the same cost, I'm going to take the SSD every time. And so what people really want is flash, but at the price of disk. And what would be even better is then getting all those total cost of ownerships benefits along with that, the lower energy costs, the better simplicity, the higher reliability, et cetera. And so this is where our I'll turn it back to you, and you can talk about what our super secret plan was.
So for those who aren't aware, I'm not going to give free shout outs to companies that make way more money than that. I mean, that are very well established in the industry. But there's an electric car company out there where if you Google, they actually talk about for years back their super secret plan to world domination and all the other things and going to the moon. And no, but actually now I'm conflating different companies that the same person might own. Hey, but it's out there, and it's a fun way to think about it. So we decided to kind of follow this a little bit because ironically, even before some of that was published, it maps to what Pure does. So let's start on the, I don't know, maybe the electric car side to illustrate it, if you don't mind.
Right. So if you think about what the super secret plan was to grow the viability and grow the market share of electric vehicles, which I think the news today was that we're looking to move the United States, just talking about us here in the US, move the United States to almost 2/3 electric vehicles by 2032. Super exciting. But you don't get there until you reach economies of scale. And that's the idea. So you start out with something that's premium, that's very high end, that may be very expensive, but you use that to prove out the technology, to make it better, to make it cheaper. You start selling more things with more use cases that starts moving down the stack in terms of where it's viable. And now you look at electric vehicles and yeah, we're still only above 5% of new vehicles, light duty vehicles were electric in 2022. But that's a huge improvement over zero. And if you look at how the adoption curve is going, it's increasing and it's accelerating, which means that yes, we've only gotten to 5%, but that's the hardest 5%, believe it or not, until you get to the very end, because it's this like sigmoid curve thing, right?
The chasm, crossing the chasm stuff for anyone who's gone and read
Exactly.
that book, go read it. Yep.
And as that gets better, it actually puts pressure on the economies of scale of the thing that you're replacing. And that's where we see Flash going. That's where we see Flash has gone. Flash started out very expensive. In the data center, it was only useful for the highest tier things. In the consumer electronics space, it was only useful in the areas where functionally hard drives would not work. If I wanted to make a music playing device that was thin enough, I couldn't put a hard drive in it, even one of those little micro drives, right? That I needed something even smaller, even more embedded, or I needed something more durable, something that could handle vibrations, or I needed something that could allow me to make a laptop that was so thin you could slice bread with it. And so over time, Flash has gotten into more and more stuff, and not just in the data center, but everywhere. Flash is in everything. It's in your refrigerator if you get one of those smart fridges, right? So as the economies of scale get better and better, again, it puts pressure on the economies of the status quo. And you can look at the recent, how the disk makers have been doing. This is where FlashBlade E comes in, is that this is for us the first time that we think there is a all flash based platform, which is going to be more environmentally friendly, more economical, easier to manage, and last fundamentally longer than a disk-based alternative. And so this is the culmination of our super secret plan, is we're finally at the part where we're ready to go take out the last tier of disk. I talked to
never possible, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah. Exactly. I talked to Pete Kirkpatrick, who's one of our VP of engineering, of hardware engineering, and he said, this is every time we've developed a new platform or launched a new platform or introduced a new drive type and all these things, it's always been about taking down the next tier of hard drives. There is no tier after this. There is no tier beyond this other than that is spinning media. I suppose you could call, there's linear media, which we'll not get into, but there is a certain point beyond which there is no longer any more more lands to conquer, right?
Anything spinning at 5,400 rotations per minute or 7,200 rotations.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the key here, and I want to make sure just to highlight this for folks, is this is Flash. We're going after a hard drive focus. And the way that we're doing it is we're making, I think for the first time, some pretty bold statements about price points publicly.
That's right. So, I mean, we have always been, when we're talking about what Pure provides to customers, we always think that we provide the most value in what we do for the products and the services and the solutions that we provide. But in this market, as I mentioned, the business differentiator that spinning disk has in this category is not any of those sort of value add things. It's purely economical. And so that's why with this product, we are talking about the economics sort of right up front, because that is the thing that will move the needle. That is the decision point that people are making. We can talk about the performance of it. We can talk about, the simplicity, et cetera, but the actual decision criteria that push people towards disk in this market is purely economical. And so we have to talk in those terms and be okay with that, because that is, again, the thing that drives, the decision criteria for environments like these multi-petabyte scale unstructured data repositories, things where data goes and it tends to sit there and not a lot happens to it. Again, it's mostly writes, not reads. So this is kind of our stake in the ground to say, yes, everybody can go out there and talk about how they're going to be cheaper than disk. This is where we're sort of putting our money where our mouth is and saying, this is kind of where the starting point is, where our flag in the sand is.
I think I may summarize a couple spots here, if that's all right. All right, Justin. So I mean, we are continuing to see crazy increases from a density standpoint, especially, and we've even commented some publicly on this actually about our direct flash modules and how much we see that capacity increasing even up. You see it on the chart there, like 300 terabytes. That's public. Yeah. This isn't just a space thing. It also has dramatic environmental impact. So that cost is a cost per gigabyte, but it's also power savings and e-waste and operational costs. There's less things to fail there and have to go into data centers and fix it. Even the space from a rack unit standpoint, all of this is built on top of, we couldn't have done it without all the work we've done on both the flash layer as well as FlashBlade software over the years. So how does the replication work? How does an object work? How does NFS work? It all works fundamentally the same way. And if you're curious for depth there, Brian Gold, actually, this wasn't meant to be a multi-part Brian Gold shout out, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we went over the core of FlashBlade architecture. If you don't mind, Justin, before we kind of get to use cases, I'll turn it back to you to kind of talk about, we have a couple different sizes here, but we're trying to keep it pretty simple. And I summarized a little bit there, so feel free to put in anything that I left out while I was in summary mode.
Yeah, for sure. So, we, as I mentioned, you'd need a 200 terabyte hard drive by the end of the decade to meet those things. Well, we're looking at, 300 terabyte direct flash modules before the end of the decade. In fact, our founder Kaz on the launch webinar for this said he sees 1 petabyte modules by the end of the decade. So really exciting stuff now. And what that means for today is that we're launching FlashBlade E in 3 different sizes: small, medium, and large. Small not being actually all that small when you think about it. It's about 2.6 petabytes usable without any data reduction. So it's going to be better than that. So it's about 4 petabytes raw, 6 petabytes raw, and 8 petabytes raw. And these numbers will go up over time. We'll have more sizes. We'll have larger drives later this year. So all of these numbers are going to go up from here. And that's because in these environments, people are talking about this amount of data. And when data is going to grow by tenfold by the end of the decade, you're gonna need all of that space. So that's our objective here, is to get bigger faster than all the other solutions on the market.
This is part of an overall portfolio. If you're asking about performance, FlashBlade E is not the conversation we want to have. We probably want to collect the FlashBlade S series that is performance focused in various ways.
Right.
And this is also available via Evergreen One. So this is still part of our full-on consumption-based model if you want it to be, and it really rounds out our entire portfolio. You've got FlashArray X and XL and C. We've got FlashBlade S and E. I think we're going to wrap up with use cases, but any final thoughts there on just kind of the FlashBlade E overview, Justin?
Yeah, I saw somebody in chat asking about like file serving speed. Like if speed's really important to you, we already have that product that we launched that last year with the FlashBlade S. And the launch of FlashBlade S is that architecture was that enabled us to now deliver FlashBlade E less than 12 months later, because of all of that work we've done up front with the engineering on that. So.
And can't emphasize that enough. It's so much. If it feels like rapid product release, it's because there's so much work done on the foundational pieces. Last but not least, we had fun with the title, out competing the dinosaurs. But which niche are we thinking of? Even which and ice cream sandwiches or sandwiches, all this stuff. It's and which.
Right.
Let's talk use cases though.
Yeah. So there are all of these use cases where we've been positioning FlashBlade S for sort of high performance tiers. But every single one of these areas has large chunks of data, the larger parts of folks' data estates that aren't living on Flash today, that are living on spinning disk. And so if you're thinking about where does FlashBlade E play, it plays where on the home turf of spinning disk. So like we see it as it's going to outcompete disk in that evolutionary niche. And we think that over time it means that that area is just going to erode for the legacy storage solutions.
I think sometimes of a lot of these applications, they have need for hot tiers, whether it's data protection, the most recent 7 or 14 days, you might need to restore really quickly in the event of a ransomware attack. Or we're talking even analytics, that Splunk has a warm tier concept. So this actually can be mapped across. And then a lot of them have long-term retention of data. You need to keep longer. It can't be locked away in a vault on a tape, but it needs to actually be better than hard disk, or it's been on disk and it's just the only spot for it. So that's kind of the classic model, but then there's nuance for each one of these where we see it playing out. If you think of another use case, please put it in the chat. We would love to hear from you around that. Any other use case thoughts?
Yeah. Sometimes our coolest use cases are ones that our customers bring to us, which is really, really fun.
That's where safe mode started and a lot of the ransomware stuff. So that's the story I tell anonymized, because it should be kind of thing. So I don't know, Justin, I feel like we should take a try at announcer voice style of where an all flash data center is no longer a dream, but a reality. I don't know that we're the right people to do that. You can try if you want to.
Running down the dream of a all flash data center.
Let's actually, we'll close up. Well, actually, let's go ahead and we'll share poll number 4, and then we'll wrap up here a little, because there was a fun one here. So I'm going to end the poll, and I'll share this one back just for folks, because we were curious. How much disk is in your data center? This is pretty evenly distributed, although there's 6% that's all flash. That's kind of fun to see. Hopefully everyone is seeing this. And then what do you use for disk today? I feel like somehow I don't think the answer's sorted automatically. I think the first 3 that we thought of were the top answers, Justin, around enterprise imaging, data protection, and analytics. Then there's a drop off after that.
And I'll just point out that there are folks with I think it's almost the majority, but maybe not, have an environment where they need the kinds of capacities that the FlashBlade E is already delivering.
So Olivia, if you don't mind launching poll number 4, and then we'll wrap it up with a drawing and some other pieces. So this is frankly where we do want to hear from you. It is actually that same list, because what use cases are interesting for you, that might not be the same answer as what you're using it for today. It's like, I've been there, done that, but I have these new needs. And even just in this space, what does drive? And we decided to have a little bit of fun with green, as in money, as an environment, as in how much experience do you need? That was your
Can you put your greenest tech on managing the system?
Like fresh out of college, like I was coming out of the help desk, and you too, actually, way back in the day.
As was I.
Yep. So we went through a lot here, And even to be honest, we chose a little bit to spend a little bit more time, even some of the career background on your side, Justin, and even the better science. We had a great launch webinar last month around FlashBlade. Even it goes even deeper in than some of the pieces, but we want to make sure to hit the highlights and the focus and the use cases. Thank you, Justin, for being a great guest, as I was sure you would be. You know, I'm always sure, but then it always works out. This is live for those folks that are wondering. This is truly live. We don't actually, record it and pretend to be live, kind of thing. But for anyone who stuck around for the drawing, thank you, drawing or the Q&A. Let me make sure here. So the winner of an Ember mug value $130, the kind you can control with your phone, is Alexander W. from Michigan. Thank you. And before we get to Q&A, just because I didn't do it, I just like, I'm in drawing mode in my head. Any final thoughts here, Justin, before we jump into Q&A? I want to give you last word before we formally move into Q&A.
Well, I'm thanks for having me. I'm super excited about where we're going. One of the reasons I'm here at Pure Storage is I really do think that we're changing the game, we're changing the industry, and that it's something that I can do that every day I can go to work and I can be proud of what we do and what we stand for. Because we're not just interested in the all-flash data center because it's cool, even though it is. We're interested in it because it's a better way to do things, and because if you look at the energy savings that you get from moving to all flash, it's really going to make a huge dent. Something like 2% of power in the entire world is used up by data centers, and a quarter of that is storage. So if you can make a dent in 0.5% of global energy usage, doesn't seem like a lot, but we need everybody rowing in the same direction to really get to where we need to be. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. So with that, we have a little bit of time left. And that's always the goal. Usually we aim for around 45 minutes. Sometimes we cheat back and forth and I summarize stuff, but there was so much good stuff you were saying. I didn't want to cut it off hard earlier, Justin. But because we intentionally leave time for Q&A. So there are some questions, and actually, I think Jason, I always appreciate Jason, folks asking for the sign up link for the next coffee break. Hey, that feels good. It was a good. So actually, I do want to make sure to highlight that next month we'll be back with John Brett, talking about storage as a service, evaluating the industry overall at a kind of an analyst level and what Pure does there, plans useless, planning indispensable. I'll assume that actually Olivia or Emily can toss that link in the chat. Let's maybe go over to the Q&A, because most of these Bish and Andy have been great about typing answers for. But actually, some of these I think we may kind of revisit here a little bit, Justin, or maybe that'll be our opportunity to say, like, I wanted to put this thing earlier and I forgot, or Andrew cut me off, So
yeah,
there was. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, no, go ahead.
So this is actually a fun one because we do get it commonly, and we'd rather just embrace it and take it on. A question from Theodore. Is there an HSM or tiering that's needed or anything like that? Where when I think of, you see a slide like this, we'll kind of go back and there's different price points and performance. So how do we think about tiering?
Well, I think that if you looked at the use case slide, one of the things is that all of the use cases that we're going after in this sort of initial period are ones where storage management or the data management moving between different classes of storage is handled by, for the most part, the applications, which is something that you pointed out, right? And so while we don't have anything to announce today with regards to HSM or things like that, one of the things that I will point out is that as I'm sure someone previously on Coffee Break has talked about, we do have this vision around Fusion. And the idea for Fusion really is to make it so that you don't have to think about tiers, that you don't have to think about any of these things. And we're not there yet today, especially not with FlashBlade, not saying we are. But if you think about where we want to go, that's really where we want to go, is we want to have this be part of the larger story around automatic storage and storage policies and all that kind of stuff. And so while we're targeting these applications that kind of have hierarchical storage management integrated into their workflows, that won't be the case forever.
I think that I can embrace is there was a great question from Stacy about FBS and FBE into a single cluster. I sometimes even answer that as well on a flash array side for what it's worth. The Pure we do obviously believe in tiers, but we haven't believed in tiering, especially kind of in-array tiering that's classically sometimes on the block side. And a lot of that actually to me is a little bit of a philosophical thing. It's this embracing that you want to know when you do any read or write a deterministic response from a performance standpoint, not knowing
Right.
or not not being able to know where is that data living under the covers and how might it respond this time based on an algorithm that's kind of a little bit opaque, right? So obviously we embrace different tiers. There's a philosophical approach to in-array tiering that I'm actually very comfortable with, having designed and built a lot of these systems over the years. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that when you look at any kind of sort of hybrid system, whether it's using tiering or caching or storing of metadata on separate, media and things like that, when you start thinking about that, every single algorithm, every single clever optimization, et cetera, will always find one edge case where it breaks. and if that happens to be your edge case, whether that's today or someday in the future, it's a rude awakening when you hit that. So we try and design our systems in a consistent, uniform way so that doesn't happen.
Great question from Ken. I think I know who he is. I always try and be careful about last names in case people don't want publicity, but I think it's Ken with one of our great partners. It actually was asking, and this is just, it's a good question. If design is based on FlashBlade, there's commonality from the software standpoint, the software layer, with the major difference being some of the underpinnings, the flash, et cetera. Does it still have the horsepower to support things like rapid recovery, et cetera? I feel like I've got to pull out it depends. And you might kind of elaborating what it depends on.
And I'll say that if you look at that use case slide, right, we still talk about FlashBlade S as our solution for rapid restore and ransomware recovery, the 4 R's. Where FlashBlade E is positioned is in that longer term data repository. Now, would it work for your particular needs? It depends, like you said. But from a positioning standpoint, rapid recovery, rapid restore, ransomware recovery is still in the realm of FlashBlade S. And it's not necessarily about like a horsepower thing per se, but really it's what are we tuning the system for? And FlashBlade E is designed for maximum efficiency, whether that's power efficiency, whether that's space efficiency, whether that's cost efficiency. Those are, just happens to have the E in the name too. Go figure. It's almost like somebody thought about that. Whereas FlashBlade S really is about that speed. And so if you're optimizing for different things, you end up with different permutations of the same system. And that's why we have 2 different products. That's why we have, FlashBlade S and FlashBlade E, both useful in the same use cases, but in different ways.
The other piece I think of there sometimes, now this is, I'm channeling a little bit of a conversation I have with Andy Stone. He was on a previous coffee break around ransomware. Sometimes what he'll talk about is that there needs to be that rapid recovery tier. You're bringing back the most recent within the last 3-7 days to restore maybe 50% of your environment in mass, but you still will need your instant response team to be able to go back and look at 30, 60, 90, 180 days back with pretty good performance to be able to see how the attackers got in, what they got access to. That's not just logging. It might even be older backups of the system. So there's even a both and approach there from a ransomware and rapid recovery standpoint.
And when you're doing forensic analysis of log data or analytics or all that stuff that's, way in the past, when you're doing queries on things, those are, things that are metadata read intensive. And those are things where a seeking hard drive head is going to be real painful.
I think with that, we are right at time. It's 59 minutes past the hour for whatever time zone you're in. I want to do one last comment and plug for joining us next month with John Brett. Storage plans useless, planning indispensable. That is an allusion to the Dwight D. Eisenhower quote for anyone who likes that. Storage is a service, and you next month on May 10th. Justin, thank you so much. I'll let you have the last words to bring us home.
Awesome. Hey, it was great being here. I'm so privileged to be part of this great organization and what we do. And I hope all of our customers, all of our prospects, all of our partners are looking forward to taking the rest of this journey with us towards the All Flash Data Center. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you all. We have Pure Storage in this month's coffee break. Have a great month. See you next month.